When everything we consume is the worst thing ever by some mouth breather on the internet, how is anything truly the worst thing ever? Time for the only podcast to officially create a list of the worst movies ever made. The only one. For real. Worst movies ever.
Worst movies ever. Happy October, listeners of the Worst Movies Ever podcast. Here today, October 1st of 2025, we are in fact starting 31 Days of Horror, even though reading the title of the movie that we are discussing today may not readily make it apparent. But the movie we're discussing, After Last Season, made in 2009, supposedly is a horror film. I would like to say it's a horrible film. But the contents within it, at least the subject matter that it is attempting to tackle, can be seen as horror, I guess. Before we get too far into it today, folks, there are a select number of films out there when you talk about trash cinema and you talk about, films that have the moniker or go into the genre of quote unquote so bad they're good. These movies that have now been erected onto the Mount Rushmore of bad movies, such as Mono's Hands of Fate, or The Room, or Troll 2, things of this nature, things like Neil Breen, any of his movies. After Last Season has become one of those movies. And for many years, I've attempted to sit through the entire film. Now, you're probably going, Double D, you watch far worse shit. At least you think I've watched far worse shit than After Last Season. And After Last Season is a movie you can't sit through? Dudes, this movie, as I said before, came out in 2009. And it has been since then till this week when I revisited the film, until I finally was able to sit through the entire thing in one session. I don't say this lightly. The movie we're about to talk about is hands down one of the most difficult things I've ever had to sit through, because it may be one of the most insulting, boring pieces of shit I've ever had thrust upon me by the trash movie community. I will never shame any of my listeners or any film fans for liking what they like. This life is far too short for me or anybody else to shame someone for enjoying something within it. I hope at this point, now that we're on episode 10, and I'm over 85 episodes on the fucking Patreon of this podcast, I think it should be pretty well apparent that I am a proponent of like what you like. You don't have to like what I like. Our lives are so short. If something brings you pleasure, please, by all means, embrace it with both arms. Unfortunately, today, After Last Season is not one of those movies for me. There's too much about this movie, and it's not even just exclusively the content that's within it, that rings so false that it, everything about me rejects it outright. Just the presentation alone, and I've had this discussion in the past, and maybe I brought this up on, I know on the Patreon we did an episode about Birdemic 3, Sea Eagle, which I put on the list of the worst movies I've ever seen, and I'm actually a fan of the first Birdemic movie. I had a good friend of mine, and the person that actually started the first podcast I ever did, Astro Radio Z, Corey Udler, a filmmaker of his own right, tell me years ago that he felt that Birdemic was an absolutely manufactured bad movie. And I rejected it. I rejected it out of the just looking at it from a film craft standpoint, that it would be so infuriatingly difficult to sit and actively ignore your own technique when it comes to editing and filmmaking at such a capacity to make the mistakes that movie makes. It isn't until now, today, when I sit down and talk to you guys about After Last Season, that I have finally found something where I feel this movie is actively attempting to make something bad. I have no 1,000%, and I know that's not a thing, so no 100% verification of this fact, because one, Mark Region, the director of this, that's a pseudonym. That's not a real name. It came out years after this, or actually within the year that this was made, that's not the person. It's been pointed towards, supposedly through internet hearsay, that is Mark Region Spike Jones? I think that's been refuted at this point. But there's also another name that was attached to this, and there was only ever one interview done with this movie, and supposedly the distributor or producer of this movie, it had a limited theatrical run, and then that person reached out to any of the theaters that had prints of this movie back when prints were actually sent to theaters and they weren't just fucking digital files projected. This person told the theaters to burn the fucking negatives and to burn the prints that were sent. That something about this movie feels absolutely fucking manufactured and false. That this is one of the only times I could very well be wrong about this. And if I am, I would love to hear that. And I would love to hear from you guys if you have any information about this. But there is nothing about this movie that feels like it was a genuinely crafted and made experience outside of, hey, let's see if we can make the worst thing you've ever seen. So what is this movie we're talking about today, 2009's After Last Season? Well, if you're watching the film, the plot is not readily apparent because it is so fucking all over the place. But what I gathered was that this is the story of two medical interns that get together and conduct a thought experiment where they think they may be psychic. And they use like these little microchips that are put to their heads, which is basically just yellow tape. And through this experiment, they're able to psychically connect to each other and also psychically connect to a killer that has murdered somebody in their city. And then ultimately battle him in somebody's fucking basement. Fucking, you listen to that, and it sounds like a normal ass plot, right? Like a normal sci-fi horror type plot. Almost like, that movie, The Cell, which I need to revisit that thing. It's been a really long time since I've watched that movie. But it feels, when you think about it from that plot description, very similar. But in no way does this movie resemble that film in any capacity. So what's my verdict? And fucking after last season? Jesus, you guys should already know. This movie is a purposely minimalistic, badly made film that feels like a grift on both the avant-garde and trash cinema. To give it any credit, in my approximation, is fucking insulting. This sounds really harsh, doesn't it? But if you can get past its clear lack of regard for making something that feels like it has seen or respected films in the past, you just have an incredibly meandering, boring film that lingers far too long and isn't interesting, engaging, or even ironically funny. And that's a big thing about films like Birdemic or The Room or Troll 2, is that there is a sense of irony that urges you to keep watching it. There's something about the fact that the artifice that they are attempting to like project onto you and to show you as a film falls apart because you see the seams. And nothing about it are choices that most normal films would make. Now that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there's also an earnestness behind those decisions that's endearing in a way that makes those films enjoyable to watch. There's something about me with After Last Season that makes me not want to put this on the list out of sheer principle, as it seems to me that that's exactly what this film wants, that it actively is making something so atrociously minimalistic and horrible that it wants that so bad it's good, horrible film money. Because at this point, the Troll 2 phenomena was already a thing. There are people out there making money on bad movies. So there's something about this, and the fact that there's slight ties to Hollywood with this movie that may just be hearsay and it may just be, internet talk, that kind of like overshadows and shrouds this film. But let me tell you, everything about this movie is atrocious, absolutely atrocious on every level by design. It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, as it's an absolutely pointless film seemingly made by a pseudonym director that has no intention of talking about the film or its production. There's kind of like this, when you watch the film, it's slightly surreal in the way that there are people that compare it to like a Lynchian film, but there is an insincerity behind this film in the way that it's constructed that we'll get into when I break it down, that none of Lynch's films have. So to associate it is also fucking insulting. And Lynch is, if we're going to use this association and we're going to tie a link between these two, because the film is a very surreal type of film. He also, notoriously hates talking about the meaning behind his films and why he made them the way that he made them. But he also is willing to talk about them and act like they exist. This Mark Regin guy is nowhere to be found. Or whoever Mark Regin is. Nowhere to be found. If you like this film for its ineptitude, then please, by all means, enjoy this film. As I said before, personally, this movie gives, in my opinion, bad/trash movies a bad name, as it doesn't feel like a genuine attempt at making a movie. It reeks of someone purposely making a bad movie to exploit an audience. And I'll say this again. If there's a one fucking tagline that I would give after last season, it's this. This film is a fucking grift. So yes, this is going on the list of the worst movies ever. After last season, I find no enjoyment in this piece of shit. So let's get to the goods, the bads, and the what the fucks.
What is good?
If there is anything good I can say about this movie, it's that this movie is an uncompromising movie that forces you to meet it on its terms and level. Otherwise, guess what? You're not going to make it more than 10 minutes through this thing. And I am not even remotely overselling this. There are movies that we have talked about here on the podcast or on the Patreon's version of this podcast that I've called 10-cent movies. This movie, in every facet of its production, feels like they had scraped together probably like $10. And when we get to the bads, and I'm kind of being chased and holding back a little bit because the vast majority of this movie is bad, and you'll see why right away. This movie doesn't feel like anyone tried. And I hate saying something like that because I've had that criticism leveled at movies that I've been involved in. And it's a horrible thing to be told when you're the creator or an artist or whatever of any sort of creative endeavor, because especially movies are made by teams of people. It's not just one person that put this thing together. It's not just whoever quote unquote Mark Region is. There's a whole list of people, actors, the grips, all of the crew, the producer, everyone, like the caterer. And if you can even say if they had a set designer, which I doubt, and we'll get to that soon. There are people that are involved in this. So I don't like saying something is like a no effort type film. But when you watch this, it's hard to believe that anything more than like a half hour before they shot any of these scenes, anyone put any thought into this. Another good, this was shot on film. This isn't some like cheapo shot on video type gimmick. Now, they claim within the credits and elsewhere in interviews, because I think there's like an interview out there I found with the lead actor in this, that this was shot on 35 millimeter. I don't believe that for a second. This doesn't look like a 35 millimeter film. This looks like a 16 or Super 16 film. So I would call into question if that's real. And there are many other things that I'll call into question as we go into the bads. But this was shot on film. So at least sort of looks like a professional film. I mean, most professional films are in focus, but we're getting too far ahead. Another good is for something this cheap, there is a sequence in this movie, and you know this is going to go straight into the bads, but we're not getting there yet. There's an invisible killer sequence in this movie, of course, which is a hallmark of a bad movie. Is that if you need to have an invisible killer, an invisible presence, you have shit the bed. But the sequence that's in this movie, in which it's supposed to be like a killer that's in a different dimension, moving items within this dimension, and it's moving furniture and opening doors and like slashing people that are in this dimension with a knife. It's way better constructed than anything else in this film. An actual thought was put into how they were going to make this happen, which leads me to believe, because these sequences are actually like the way they move in, the way they hid, how they moved this stuff. is pretty fucking well done for such a cheap piece of shit that it leads me to believe that this was made by people that knew what they were doing and actively making something horrible. And the last good I have is that the script of this movie could be mildly interesting if it were handled by literally anyone else. Now let's stop beating around the bush and let's get to the bads.
What is bad?
To say that this movie looks low budget is a fucking understatement. This movie is so bad by design that everything about it screams intentional anti-reality. And what do I mean by that? Is that in most normal films or most things that are presented in front of a camera and then showcased to audiences have furniture that feel appropriate for the locations that they're at. Have locations that feel appropriate to what the scene is calling for. Nothing in this movie looks like what we're talking about within this in any said scene. And you're like, Derek, I still don't understand what you're talking about. Let's go to the first scene of this film, which is supposedly taking place in an MRI room. Clearly, the room that we are in is some house in a bedroom, because no MRI room that I've ever experienced, not that I've experienced many, or that I've ever seen, had a window with blinds on it. Also, no MRI room ever had printed on just 8 by 10 white paper, X-ray photos, literally taped to the wall. Also, no MRI room ever had the technician in it in a corner with a desk constructed of cardboard with white, it almost looks like wrapping paper wrapped around it. Also, no MRI room or MRI machine I've ever seen in my life also looked like it was constructed with cardboard and white paper. This looks like something kids would put together as a play fort. This is what I'm talking about. The entire fucking movie has such a level of unreality to it in the way that everything is actively pushed to the opposite end of the spectrum of reality. There are scenes that are in apartments, but it's clear that it's just somebody's basement with fucking metal shelving in it, and then somebody just taped wallpaper to a corner. Every single fucking door that's shown, it's not often, signs to indicate that we're anywhere, are just fucking printed sheets of white 8 by 10 paper in Arial font describing where we're at, or arrows. Books in classic Neil Breen style have printed paper over top of them telling you what the books are. Half of this movie is supposed to be taking place in some medical facility, and it's just somebody's basement. This is what I'm talking about. The majority of this movie has such a level of... You got to get past all of this. It's obviously intentional that they're doing this, but it is so low rent that the bar for entry for anybody looking to just jump into this, and we haven't talked about how awful the acting is or anything like that. The editorial, what the fuck is that in this movie? that you have to, like I said before in the goods, you have to just completely let go of every instinct that you have to even remotely allow this film to do anything for you. So the budget that supposedly this movie had a budget of $5 million, and that the film was shot for $40,000, and then the last fucking $4 million of the budget was spent on a collection of CGI sequences. And when I say sequences and CGI, I mean shit that doesn't even look finished. Like, this is supposedly these sequences in this film that have CGI that are essentially almost entirely just fucking blocks flying across the screen cost $4 million. Now, if we're honest, in 2009, CGI was in a way different place. But in no way do I believe it. Those sequences costed $4 million fucking dollars. This movie's a grift. All right, so let's get on to this movie. Like, watching it pissed me off. Like, I found zero enjoyment on watching this movie. The audio of this movie is fucking atrocious. Clearly just a goddamn microphone set somewhere in the room or on the camera, because everything is pure reverb. Like, the ratio between fucking direct sound and reverb's winning. Big fucking time. The editing in this movie is just barely fucking functional. The B-roll that is shown is like Skidmarink level, showing a corner of a room or some random fucking like shelving unit. It makes no fucking sense. The props and set design are mostly cardboard. Pictures are all printed off of a computer and white paper. Locations aren't remotely convincing. Much of the movie, and I mean this, much of the movie is not in focus. Just plain not in focus. Day and night shots are mixed in one scene. And that scene I told you about, the first scene where we're supposedly in an MRI room. In between shots, the blinds are lit up. Obviously, it's daytime, and then dark, like it's nighttime. But the lighting saves it, and you're supposed to not pay attention that that's what's happening. The soundtrack, oh my God, it's literally just someone randomly playing notes on a keyboard. It's fucking garbage. And literally not one location makes sense for what we are being told these scenes are taking place in. They're mostly bedrooms for medical offices, basements and stock rooms for like apartments and classrooms. There's an exterior shot in this movie where they literally comped a bunch of white shapes on like some shot of like a forest or the edge of a forest lot. And then they just typed in like the most basic ass Arial font, the facility's name on it with a drop shadow. That's what we're fucking talking about here, guys. When you look at the credits of this movie, it claims this was shot in 35 millimeter and that SAG was involved in this movie. I'd have to look deep into this. If these folks were SAG and were like involved in it, SAG was involved in this, that also screams to me that there's something else going on behind the scenes of this movie, because in no way did anyone or anything in this movie come across like it was a union production in any way. And as I said before, I could be wrong. And I'm just going by my experience in making film and being a video professional for almost 20 years. Watching this thing, give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking break. Oh, this movie, and I know I keep bringing this up with the locations and the fact that this is literally just shot all entirely in one person's house. The entire movie, and then the people talk like we're in different places. Let's talk about the color palette of this movie. White. I hope you like the color white, because it's almost the entire movie. Shot compositions of everything are fucking insane. The lighting comes from the Herschel Gordon Lewis school of set up one bright light and just go. Who cares what shadows are cast? There's literally a shot where you get a shadow of some light fixture that is put up that obviously shouldn't have been there. Didn't care. But there's so much negative space in all of these shots. And what I mean by that is when somebody is shot in frame and there's a lot of wall to either side of them or above them, that's usually considered negative space compositionally. There's so much of it in everything in this movie that it all feels like a purposeful mistake. Almost none of the B-roll in this movie makes any lick of sense. And of course, we have an invisible fucking killer in this movie. Then with my final bad, because I'm just going to fucking wrap this up. Everything about this movie just screams like, this is dog shit. Why the fuck am I even watching this movie? There's nothing about it that you can take seriously. The only way you fucking watch this is ironically. And I didn't find any of it to be funny. It all just screamed so purposely fucking manufactured. Like, there's nothing. There are people out there that I've read that this is like a minimalist exercise, like Dogville or something like that. That's an insult to Dogville. There's a point, and this probably would be like most people that complain about like scripts jumping the shark. This movie, an hour in, all of a sudden pulls out in the majority of what we had just watched was just a dream. But the movie continues on for another 20, 25 pointless fucking minutes and then just fucking ends. God, this movie fucking sucks. Let's get to the what the fucks.
What the fuck is that?
What's my what the fuck? The entire movie. I could literally go shot to shot, scene to scene through everything in this movie, and it's a what the fuck, because it makes no sense. And I know some of you out there may be kind of like, well, Derek, do you just not like surreal film? And I do. I honestly do. But I think right off the bat, watching that first scene, which is mildly funny from when you're just trying to get acclimated to like the reality in the world that this film resides in, when you notice that this just continues on for the entire thing, something about it just rang so false to me that I immediately started trying to read up on this. And the more I read up on this, the less and less I fucking liked it. Because this is the antithesis of what us trash film fans like. And I'm speaking for myself and a lot of the people that I know, and a lot of the community around this kind of stuff that we talk about and that we enjoy. We like bad movies that are sincere efforts. That there's a part of the fact that somebody, without question, thought they were putting their best foot forward and made this thing that's imperfect, that is so endearing. But after last season, in almost every capacity, feels manufactured in order to grift trash film fans. And I cannot think of anything that I hate more. For real. Like, if we're doing a podcast where we're celebrating bad movies and you have this just middle finger intentionally produced bad movie to try and like get money from bad movie fans, fuck you, dude. I hate that shit. And after last season, I can't believe 2 weeks in a row I've watched two of the worst movies I've ever watched. At least this one didn't have anyone lapping up their own puke in it. So that's all I got on After Last Season. This episode of Worst Movies Ever. Next week, we're going to be watching the Uwe Boll video game adaptation, Alone in the Dark, starring Christian Slater. So, yes, yay. Man, this has been brutal the last couple of weeks. So, I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.
Worst Movies Ever podcast is executive produced by Vaughn Koolmeyer and Shannon Smith. For more Worst Movies Ever, and to make the Doctor watch your worst movies ever, subscribe to the Worst Movies Ever Patreon at patreon.com/Worst Movies Ever. There you will get a monthly exclusive WME podcast plucked from the user-generated film list, randomized episode to episode. Until next time, celebrate trash at all costs. Toodles.